Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome to this race reaction stream for the 2020 Bahrain Grand Prix that finished about 2 hours ago in the Sakhir Desert. And, well, it was one that we're going to remember, certainly, well, forever, for as long as we live. Because there were things that happened today that were, impossible to forget. Things that are going to live in the memory and things we're going to think about even if we're not directly shown it, and we'll get onto that later on. The race today wasn't, I didn't think the race today was great, to be honest. In terms of entertainment, there were some good overtakes at times, good battles, but it was really a 4 or 5 out of 10, to be honest, for me, in terms of pure entertainment. But after the start of the Grand Prix, and again, we'll get into that later on, this Grand Prix is only going to be known for one thing, and it always will be. And I'll, get onto that in a bit. Of course, when it comes to Haas F1, you guys know what I'm talking about. We normally talk about them towards the end. But I think, given what's happened today, the best thing I can do is, get what happened today out of the way first, or, after the results. So I think that's what I'm going to do. But, forgetting what happened, let's first get into the results of the Bahrain Grand Prix. So, if you don't know what the actual finishing results were for the Bahrain Grand Prix of 2020, here they are. Lewis Hamilton winning another race in Formula 1 in 2020. He's won, 11 races, I think, this season. I mean, considering we haven't had, 20 races this season. I mean, it's just incredible that he's won that many races. Max Verstappen second, Alex Albon third, Albon's second podium of his Formula 1 career. And also, Red Bull today got their first podium in Bahrain since 2013. It's how poor they've been in the last few years around Bahrain. So yeah, good day for Red Bull. Norris fourth and Carlos Sainz fifth. Great day for McLaren. And they, as we'll get into later, have really struck a big blow against the other two teams in that battle for third in the Constructors. Pierre Gasly sixth. What a drive on a one-stop strategy. Seventh, Daniel Ricciardo. Eighth, Valtteri Bottas. He was a bit unlucky with, his circumstances, but didn't exactly help himself. 9th, Esteban Ocon, and 10th, Charles Leclerc. And then finishing the race, but not in the points, Kvyat, Russell, Vettel, Latifi, Raikkonen, Giovinazzi, Magnussen, and Perez. Perez technically did retire, but he was past the 75% race distance mark, I believe, or 90% race distance. So that's why he was only 4 laps down, even though his engine blew, of course, when he was running in third place. And retiring from the race, Lance Stroll and Romain Grosjean. Now, before, and you guys, if you've watched before, you'll know the schedule. We go through the top teams and then the midfield and then the shit teams at the end. But I think the only thing I can really do is first start off with the crash at the start. So I'm not going to show the crash because it is horrific. It really is. So I'm not going to show any pictures of it because, yeah, it's really, again, horrific, graphic. And I don't want you guys to, relive it in some way because it was really bad. So, of course, Grosjean had his accident on the exit of turn 3 with Daniel Kvyat, went into the barriers, and that crash he had was, for me, the worst crash I've ever seen in Formula 1. It was so bad. I can't even begin to describe how bad it was. It was just unbelievably horrific. Unbelievably horrific. And when you look at the details of, what happened to the car, what happened to him, I don't understand how he is still alive. He shouldn't be alive. Thankfully, he is. Thankfully, he is, but it is an absolute miracle that he's still alive because that car, I wouldn't even say it just disintegrated. It disintegrated, it decapitated itself. It just completely, as soon as it hit the barriers, it almost disappeared into thin air. It hit the barriers that hard. It was incredible, the impact and all of that. And I guess I'll, talk about it from my point of view when I watched it live. Thankfully, by the way, I didn't do a watch along, which I was originally planning on doing. Until, as of recently, I've had a relapse again with my depression, which thankfully I have, I've got a lot better in the last few days. And thank you guys a lot for the support recently. But thankfully, I didn't do a race watch along because I probably would have cut the stream off very, very quickly after that accident, even though he walked away, because it was so bad. So, the race start happened. Sat down just before the race, watched the start. The start was pretty exciting. Bottas going from second down to sixth, and Perez and Ricciardo, getting up in there. Pretty exciting start. And I was, always looking out at the back towards, around Alfa Romeo, Ferrari, Haas to see what was going on there. There's plenty of sparks flying, which of course is a common sight here in Bahrain because the cars do hit the ground very hard and it's a night race. So those sparks get illuminated even more. And, I was just looking to see what was going on. And then I could see that there was a car off the track. I think it was Lance Stroll who went off the track and broke his front wing, or Lando Norris had a damaged front wing or something like that. Well, I could see that there was already contact going on, but then literally 2 seconds after that, the contact happens between Kvyat and Grosjean. And it wasn't really, there wasn't really anyone at fault for me. Grosjean came across to the right. Sorry about my throat, by the way. I've been awake for a long time today. And my throat's been battered for the last few days anyway. I mean, you guys know that by now. My throat is always absolutely fucked. Grosjean came across on Kvyat. The problem is, that part of the track, it's really tight. So if you do come across like that, contact is, I wouldn't say inevitable, but it's, it definitely can happen at that track, or not at that track, at that part of the track, given, again, the circumstances. But, yeah, the contact was made, and then Grosjean flew into the barriers, and his car, if anyone's not seen the crash yet, I mean, I don't really advise you do. I mean, I know you will if you haven't seen it yet, because, you want to see what everyone's talking about and all of that, but yeah, so Kvyat and Grosjean make contact. Grosjean goes into the barriers, and his car literally exploded as it hit the barriers into flames. And I will be honest, I'll be brutally honest, and people might not want to hear this. When that car hit the barriers and his car caught on fire, my whole body just went absolutely ice cold white. And it was the same feeling I had when, because I had the unfortunate, I wouldn't say job, but, I was sat here doing a video whilst it happened. I had the unfortunate sight of seeing Antoine Hubert's crash that, killed him. And I saw it live, and it was the same feeling when I saw Antoine Hubert's crash, where it was one of those crashes where you were hoping he was fine, and you were thinking that maybe he'll probably be fine, but there was just something about the crash that as soon as it happened, something in my mind just said, he's dead. And I know, again, that's brutal to say, but that's, the brutal, honest truth. As soon as he hit the barriers and his car burst into flames, in my head, I said, he's dead. Because I just didn't see how he could possibly live through that. It was such a horrific impact. And when you actually look, at the other replays other than the first live angle, it's almost, I still don't get how he survived. I don't get it. But again, when he hit the barriers, again, in my mind, it wasn't really I said it. It was more just a feeling of just he's dead, because it was that bad. It was just one of those crashes, and people who watch motorsport for long enough, I think they'll understand that feeling where you see a certain crash and you just know that it's a bad one. That's the feeling I got. It was just not a good feeling at all. I remember saying in the Discord, I've not got a good feeling about this at all, because I thought he was, it was one of those where he was in a really bad, situation. Thankfully, though, he walked away, and when he did, the sigh of relief I, had was phenomenal, and I'm so thankful that he didn't get seriously injured or even worse from that crash. But if you look at the further replays of, kind of like slow it down of, what happened once he hit the barriers, it's almost, you can't believe that he actually survived. Because for me, even though, the halo did save him, there's no doubt about that. And, the protection drivers get from the safety devices on F1 cars and the way the cars are built these days, no doubt that did help. But even with all of those, the chances of him surviving should have been at most 5%. It was, that bad of a crash. It was one of those crashes where no matter how safe you make a car, it's still a crash bad enough to sadly take someone from us. That's how bad it was. But somehow he, has come away with injuries, and you can see there on the bottom scroll, he has come away with suspected broken ribs and minor burns. How that is the only injuries he has so far, I have no idea. But I mean, let's, look at it. I mean, his car, when it hit the barriers, his car exploded into flames. His car split in half, which I've never seen before. I've never seen an F1 car split in half. I mean, I've seen impacts against a barrier. I've seen failures on certain cars where it's, where, two front tires have fallen off or they've had big tire failures. I have never seen a car hit the barriers so hard the car literally splits in two. And then again, the flames. And then when you look at the fact that his car went, through the barriers. It is an absolute miracle he survived that. Absolute miracle. I still cannot, and I don't think I ever will, understand. I mean, I think everyone knows that what, saved him was the halo. But I still don't understand how even with the halo, he was still able to survive that, because it was that bad of a crash that even with all the safety devices that the cars have now, it's still one of those where, not even those can save you. But he miraculously walked away with, again, minor burns and a suspected broken ribs. Just wow. Absolute wow. And, thankfully, he is... physically, he is okay, I guess, considering what his injuries, if he was going to be alive, what his injuries would have been, most likely. I'm guessing you could say he's okay. Mentally, I'm sure he is absolutely destroyed because, he's knocked right on death's door with that crash. And then, after that crash happened live and they weren't showing it and all of that, I was in a terrible state, to be honest. And, even seeing the crash, even though I knew he was okay, I'll admit I was welling up and almost, getting to the point of crying because it was that bad. It was that bad. It was just, again, it was one of those crashes where if you had showed people, say 100 people, that crash and had not told them the result of the crash in terms of, what happened to the driver, and you asked them, is this driver dead or alive? I think they would have said, 90% of them would have said dead. because it was just one of those crashes that just looked like a classic fatal accident. And again, that's brutally honest to say, but I think we can all agree that that's true. It was one of those crashes that most people do not walk away from at all. But somehow he did. And it was such a bad crash that plenty of people talk about, 20 years ago, he wouldn't have survived this, or 30 years ago. Fuck that. 5 years ago, he wouldn't have survived this. He absolutely wouldn't have. That's how bad it was, that even though the cars are so safe nowadays compared to how they used to be, that, they've had to be made this safe to keep him barely, I won't say barely alive, but to give him that small chance of survival and to allow him to survive. It's just incredible. It is really incredible that, that he's actually survived it. And I think before we get into, the teams, I'm going to read your comments in the chat first before, we move on, because this is clearly the biggest story of the day, and it's always going to be the biggest story of the day. I think it's only right we get this out of the way first before we, build up to it later on. But yeah, it's going to take me some time to watch the crash back again, because I really don't want to see it for quite a while at the very least. I prefer it if they just, deleted all footage of it, to be honest, because it's that bad. But I will never understand how, he was not killed by that. Again, miraculous. Absolutely miraculous. And thank the Lord he is still alive. Because the chances he had of surviving, given what happened, again, was so small. So small. Luckily, he was in that, small percentage that survived. Right, let's get into some of these comments, and let's get it all off of our chest, I guess. Francisco says, I couldn't enjoy the race today. Couldn't get over what happened at the start. So glad Grosjean is okay. Spider Monkey asks, I wonder if he'll be able to drive next week. If he doesn't want to drive, for the rest of the season, there's only 2 races left, then I think, no one should complain about that. He deserves to never race again. He has really got lucky that he's come away from this accident. So, it doesn't really matter. If he wants to, great, and it shows just how brave he is, and also F1 drivers are, that they can suffer such a bad accident and want to get in the car at the same track a week later. But, I don't think anyone will begrudge him if he was like, nah, I don't want to, give it to Mick Schumacher or Pietro Fittipaldi or someone like that. Francisco said, I think I've already read this, he said he couldn't enjoy the race today. I said in the Discord before the race for real got underway, about an hour and a half later, there was no way after that crash I was going to be able to enjoy the race. There was no way, because you can't just, put it out of your memory like it didn't exist and then just move on and then somehow enjoy the race. That's the thing. Even if that crash didn't happen, though, it wasn't that great of a race. It was a 4 or 5 out of 10 for me. Again, there were a couple good battles, but most of the time the passes on track were just easy DRS overtakes, which is, again, why I think we need to get rid of DRS, because it's really hurting us in terms of us fans, in terms of giving us battles. Not really overtakes we're after, it's battles we're after. But yeah, even if the race was very good, I wouldn't have enjoyed it anywhere near as much as maybe some other people. I just couldn't enjoy the race today, so I, completely sympathize. Gilbert, he lived, so that's good, but the picture will haunt my mind for some days. It'll be on my mind definitely for a few days, and when I watch the final 2 races, definitely the race next week, it will definitely be on my mind because they're racing on the same track. So, and if he does come back to race at the next week's Grand Prix, that's all you're going to think about when you see him on track is that incident at that corner. But I think if he did get killed by it, I think we would have never have forgotten it. I think with the Hubert crash, because it was F2 and F2 has a much smaller audience, a lot of people didn't see it. I did, and that's why it still lives in my mind to this day, and I still get occasionally, that flash image in my mind of it, and it still, haunts me to this day. But if Grosjean had suffered the same fate as Antoine Hubert or Jules Bianchi, I think we would have never forgot it ever, and I think it would have been that traumatic. We'd all be just broken by it for months. So, thankfully survived it. Right, let me look at some other comments here quick. Crystal Racing saying, yeah, rip or rest in peace, Antoine Hubert and Jules Bianchi, absolutely. Gilbert says, feeling the same, dude. I saw it happen and I thought he is dead. Didn't know who crashed at the moment, but we all know 20 drivers. So I was, I think he says choked. And Blue Flag Alpha saying I almost cried. And Gilbert saying I didn't almost, I cried a little. I was nearly there. Because it was so bad. So bad. And yeah, when he hit the barriers, not like I thought about it and thought, what, he probably is dead. It was just that instant feeling, and it's just, when you see an accident happen live, whether, the person survives or not, it's a bad one if you get that feeling straight away. And that's the feeling I had straight away, was he's dead. Because it was just, hitting the barriers as hard as he did. And by the way, I think the impact was 53 Gs. Hitting the barriers at the impact he did, and then the car just exploding, the point where on the live TV you couldn't see the car anymore. It was, again, a classic case of, if you, I'll try and pick my words carefully here, but if you were to, again, like I said earlier, if you were to show that accident to people who didn't know the fate of the driver, they'd probably say he died from it. That's how bad it was. Rona Brady says, it was an insane crash. However, I think one of those crashes that happen once every 20 years. Yeah, and I agree with that, because it does happen once in a while. Luciano Berti at Spa in 2001, that was another one, and especially at that time where the cars were a lot more open in terms of the cockpit. You didn't have a hands device back then. Of course, didn't have a halo. The cars, in terms of strength, weren't that strong compared to now. In terms of the suspension loads and all of that. But, that's a crash that at the time you look at and think, how the fuck does he survive that? Because he literally piled into the barriers at Spa just before Blanchimont at such a speed that you'd think, yeah, that's a goner. And I guess this is what this crash will go down as, kind of like Luciano Berti's, where at the time live you're thinking, how on earth has he survived that? And then, when you look back on it years later, you'll just, you'll look back on it and think, fuck, that was bad. But, he thankfully lived on. Run and Brady says, I was so shocked to see the flames ignite the way they did. If the car had not caught fire, I don't think anyone would have been. I think people would have thought, oh yeah, that's quite a big crash, but I don't think anyone would have been like, oh god, we're now in the position of life and death. It was just the bursting into flames instantly, and it wasn't just a little flame. He exploded like a fireball, and it kept burning like a massive raging fire. It did kind of have similarities to Niki Lauda's crash at the Nürburgring in '76, where his car, once the impact that happened that caused the fire, it wasn't just a little fire. It just, boom, just fucking exploded. Right, let's find some final few comments, and then we'll get to the teams and put this behind us. That's the best thing to do. Gilbert says, I saw a fireball in the background. I didn't understand at the moment. I thought it was a gasoline tank or something. When I saw what happened, I understood. Still a little shaky at the moment. Well, F1, do you think the barriers need to be changed at other circuits? You can't really say at the moment, because you need to wait to the FIA investigation, because if they find something with the barriers that wasn't up to spec, then of course, changes need to be made. But my guess, kind of like what happened with the investigation into the Antoine Hubert crash, is what will probably happen is they will conclude that it was just such a freak accident and the impact was so great that you couldn't have possibly predicted or foreseen such a heavy impact. And I think that is what will probably be took away from this, is that, the barriers, they're pretty strong for racing cars. Let's not get blasphemous and say they're weak as fuck. They're not. But I think, again, it will come out that it was just such a heavy impact that, again, you just can't foresee that stuff. Again, like the Antoine Hubert crash, they've done a lot, the FIA, to improve the safety cell that the driver sits in and make the driver as protected as possible from impacts. But the impact Hubert suffered was so heavy that I don't think they could ever really stop that accident from happening and from what happening, because it was just, wrong place, wrong time, a 1 in 1 billion chance of happening that just sadly happened on that day. And I think this is the same here. It was just such a freak accident that no one could have foreseen, but also it's, the chances of something like this happening are so incredibly small. It's not something you're looking for when you create a barrier or when you design cars for strengthening them, for impacts and all of that. You're not thinking of this. You're not thinking of accidents like this. And I guess you could say, thankfully, because Grosjean, with Grosjean surviving, they can, look at this crash, investigate it all, and look to see if there's anything that needs strengthening, barriers-wise or cars-wise, so they can improve. And, if it happens again somehow, which I don't think it ever will, I don't think you'll ever see an accident like this, that they'll be able to say, if it did by some miracle happen again, it wouldn't be as bad, and the driver would walk away. So we can't say for sure at the moment when it comes to the whole barriers and whether they're up to spec and all of that. But my guess is they'll just put it down as, we couldn't foresee such a thing happening. And I don't think anyone could. Hello to Tom Simon. Hello to... I'm not going to pronounce your name who says hello, Chazza, because I'm going to absolutely butcher it, and I don't want to do that. Right, let me read one final comment, and then we'll get to the teams, because I think I've rambled on a bit too long. Half an hour on this. But then again, you know, it's the... As I said earlier, it's the biggest story from today, and it's on every person's mind that watched this race, and everything after that has, you know, just dissipated, really. Okay. Nice notification noise for you if you heard that. Really turn my phone off. Let me do that. Ronan Brady saying it's unlikely he'll be able to drive and mentally drive the next 2 races. If he does, then he is so mentally strong to be able to do that, and it shows why, you know, F1 drivers, why they're so highly paid, because they are literally risking their lives for entertainment purposes and for obviously sporting purposes. They are essentially fighter pilots. And yeah, they deserve every penny they get, and to be honest, they deserve even more. Right, let me read one final one. JB, the drivers are really brave to go racing after what happened. I think that's the thing, is when these drivers get to this age and, you know, get to Formula One, you know, bad accidents happen, you know, not all the time, but they happen enough to the point where people kind of get used to, you know, a bad enough accident happening that throws out a red flag, and, you know, you kind of, you know, sat around hoping the guy's okay or girl's okay. So they're kind of, you know, they're mentally prepared for it, I guess. Especially drivers, you know, like Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel. You know, they've been in F1 a long time, and they've seen crashes that were really bad, and, you know, had to wait on news, and, you know, had to still go racing after that. You know, Felipe Massa in Hungary, he kills Bianchi, the Antoine Hubert thing, and, you know, the day before that, Belgian Grand Prix last year. So drivers, the reason they're able to just move on, I guess, is because, you know, they've been racing for so long that they are, I won't say used to it, I don't think that's the right word, but they are mentally prepared for it, and they are, you know, it's not a new thing to them. You know, if they were really young and they hadn't been racing for that long, it probably would hit them hard to the point where they didn't want to race. But yeah. Anyway, I think we're gonna need to move on now. So let's get on to the teams. Mercedes first. Lewis Hamilton doing his usual Lewis Hamilton things, leading, well, not every single lap, but he basically, you know, did. He did. You know, even when he wasn't in the lead, he was net in the lead. Let's be honest. Just an all-dominant performance in qualifying and the race. The guy's just so fucking good. Qualifying, he made F1 look like they were not even in the same formula. In the race, there were plenty of times in the race compared to Max Verstappen, who was second, where it looked as though Verstappen was quite close to him and was maybe, you know, going to come after him for that race win. But Lewis Hamilton just handles everything so well, and is able to just manage the race so well whilst being so quick that to beat him as a team and driver combination, you've got to literally do a perfect race. And, you know, Max Verstappen and Red Bull combined did not do a perfect race, as we'll get onto later, because they could have challenged Lewis Hamilton. But, you know, Hamilton, again, so consistent. The team's so consistent. Hamilton, I mean, what's this? His 94th race win now, so he's only, 6 away from 100, which he'll get next season. Yeah, again, just so good. And another all-dominant display, even though at times his pace wasn't great in terms of, leading the race and looking comfortable enough, he was dominant, let's be honest. Valtteri Bottas, though, just another, poor race. Qualifying was okay. Wasn't terrible, but, his pace in qualifying probably could have been, a couple tenths better. Considering especially that if you look at, normally how he goes at this track compared to Lewis Hamilton. Sorry, Lewis Hamilton, my throat is really hurting. Valtteri tends to be better than Lewis Hamilton at a circuit like this. And I think the reason for that is because it's not an easy track, but it's not that hard of a track to get to grips to. You don't have to be one of the best on the grid. It's not one of those drivers circuits where you really find out what drivers are really, top of the bill that certain season or certain eras. When we ever go to Suzuka or Spa, tracks like that, you really get to see what drivers are really, at the top of their game. Bahrain's not really about that. It's really about just getting the most out of your car rather than yourself, because there's no real corners on the track where you can really gain much time over another driver just by being a better driver. But yeah, Bottas qualifying went great, and then the race, of course, poor start, and then he had a decent restart, and then got a puncture, which of course wasn't good, and did really hurt his race, because I think he probably would have finished on the podium. I don't think he would have finished in second though, because I think Max was too quick for that. And then I have to say again, Valtteri has proven that he cannot get his way through the field when he has to, when he's been hampered by a puncture or front wing damage. He is really lacking in that area compared to, obviously, his teammate, but other drivers on the grid, your Verstappens, your Leclercs, your Ricardos, drivers like that, Norris, Sainz. Bottas just doesn't have that cutting edge in terms of overtaking. I think he does when it comes to single lap pace, but when it comes to overtaking, he just doesn't have that, he's not able to just sieve his way through the field and just, pick people off. You know what I mean? And that's why he was so far behind his teammate before that safety car at the very end of the race, because he couldn't get his way through the field quick enough. I don't think it was because his pace was poor. It wasn't as good as Lewis Hamilton's, but I don't think it was poor, his pace. It was just simply he couldn't get past people because, again, he just doesn't have that, as I said, cutting edge, but also he just doesn't have that, I guess, that fire and that aggression to just get moves done and just, make it stick and all of that. He just doesn't have it. And that's why, when he gets put in these positions where he has to work his way back to the field, he suffers a lot, because he is, I wouldn't say Sebastian Vettel is, I think Sebastian Vettel is a lot better at overtaking. There's no doubt about that. But he's kind of similar to Vettel in that he thrives a lot more off of just being in clear air. Doesn't have to necessarily be leading the race, but he thrives a lot more off of being in clean air. When you compare that to a driver like Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen, it doesn't really matter if they're in clean air or dirty air. They're always going to fight their way to the best position they can in the race. Where with Valtteri Bottas or Sebastian Vettel, sometimes if they get held up in traffic, I guess it's just a mentality thing. They just can't fight their way through with that decisiveness. And Valtteri Bottas is definitely a lot more extreme when it comes to that. Sebastian Vettel, of course, is a lot better of an overtaker, but I think you guys see my point. Vettel is a lot better in clear air than he is in dirty air and behind other cars, because I think he does struggle a lot mentally when he's having to race a load of cars compared to Hamilton, Verstappen, and Ricciardo and Leclerc and drivers like that. Alonso. And then, yeah, he just got held up all race, tried to make moves, just wasn't quick enough simply, and he finished down in, what was it, 8th place? Yeah, poor race. But really poor weekend for Valtteri. Next race in, same track, different layout. He'll probably do a bit better because I think the track layout, it's a new layout for everyone, I guess, except for a few turns here and there. But I think if you look at the new layout, it's kind of similar to Austria in terms of it's very, straight line oriented and very power hungry, I guess. So he should be a bit better. But yeah, just, very poor today. But Lewis Hamilton, he was great, as always. Anyway, let's move on to Red Bull. Second and third. As I said earlier, Red Bull, this is their first podium since 2013 at the Bahrain Grand Prix. It's amazing to think that, because even in the last couple years, they've been competitive enough for a podium, but it just hasn't happened for whatever reason. Max Verstappen, again, great. He probably should have locked out the front, been on the front row with Lewis Hamilton locking it out with him. But he didn't get it because he didn't improve, I think, his final sector in qualifying. And then in the race, got into second and did give Lewis Hamilton a run for his money. He absolutely did. And there were plenty of times where it looked as though Max Verstappen might have been able to really, compete hard for the win. But it just never happened. And I think the biggest opportunity for him to do so was when we got to his second pit stop, where he went from the hard tyre onto another set of hard tyres. And because of how strong the undercut is in Bahrain, that decision that Red Bull made was a great one, because even though Max's pit stop was it 3 seconds, I think, too slow, he was still quite close to Lewis Hamilton, when Lewis Hamilton pitted. I think if you actually look at the gaps, it was about the same it was before Max had pitted. So if they got the pit stop right, Max probably would have been right within DRS of Lewis Hamilton and been able to maybe have a go. But Red Bull, for the first time in a while, really fucked up the pit stop. And that cost Max Verstappen a chance to fight for victory. And then he settled in for second, went for the fastest lap and got that. But yeah, great race by him as usual. Alex Albon, good weekend. Qualifying, I thought he did very well, considering, again, the circumstances that he's racing in a team that is completely oriented towards Max Verstappen and is built towards him. In the race, his pace compared to Sergio Perez was not that good, to be honest. I think that's the only criticism you can really have. But with Perez's failure, Albon picked up the points that, he really had to, and finished in third place. But I think this weekend for Albon is probably, if you look at just pure consistency, is probably his best weekend of the season, because he was consistently right up there in the top 4 positions in qualifying and the race. That is what Red Bull are asking for. They're not asking for, Alex Albon to beat Max Verstappen. Alex Albon's not at Red Bull to do that. He's at Red Bull to support, the team in the constructors and support Max Verstappen. Now, he didn't really support Max Verstappen in terms of the fight for victory. I don't think, we should have ever expected him to. But, where he was in the, the order, that's where Red Bull want him. They want him to be, I guess, the best of the rest after his teammate and the 2 Mercedes drivers, which is what he was today. So he did the job he, was expected to do. So great. I still don't think he deserves the drive for next season. They haven't officially announced it yet, but I don't think he deserves to stay at Red Bull. I don't think he's done enough. He has had certain qualifying sessions where he's been good. He has had certain races where he's been good. But consistently, he has not been good enough to be in that car. And when you consider that Sergio Perez, free driver, can sign him up right now. And Perez, has been one of the best drivers this season. Is 5th in the Drivers' Championship. And without him, Racing Point would not be anywhere close to finishing 3rd in the Constructors. And, Perez, again, missed 2 races through COVID. How that guy's not on the grid for next season, I just don't get. I mean, I know the reasons why he probably won't get the drive at Red Bull. But in terms of a pure racing perspective, there is no real argument for me of Albon over Perez. The reason Red Bull won't put Perez in the car over Albon is simple. They don't want to lose face over their driver academy because they know that even though, of course, Pierre Gasly now is, doing well and all of that, their driver academy in terms of talent has decreased in the last 5 years. Ever since, the era of Verstappen and Sainz, the talent coming through the Red Bull Academy has not been as good. I think everyone would agree with that. And I think they know that, but because they are so proud of their academy and they don't want to lose face over it, they just won't. They will not do what I think is the right thing. They're just too stubborn, and they're acting, I think, quite immature, to be honest, with their decision making. And if we get to next season and Albon is still doing what he's doing and is still, not quite cutting it, Red Bull have only themselves to blame because, Perez on the market, he's right there. They offered Perez a contract. Perez is going to take it. If there is a contract offer, Perez is going to take it. He's not stupid. Perez is not going to say, nah, I don't want to race for Red Bull. I'll just take a year off. Red Bull are not some, mediocre shit team. They've not been that good this season compared to what I think they should have been. But, they're still top 2 or 3 on the grid in terms of just pure performance, trackside and all of that. So, the right decision is for them to go for Sergio Perez. But, of course, we know they're not going to do that. They're going to keep Alex Albon because they don't want to suffer, I guess, a PR disaster of having to put a non-academy driver in the car for the first time since, Mark Webber in 2007. But then again, Mark Webber wasn't too bad, was he, for Red Bull? Only came very close to winning a championship and won loads of races. Wasn't too bad. The one before him, David Coulthard, wasn't too bad. Only got the team's, first podium, Formula One. But yeah, Red Bull do Red Bull things. Next up, Ferrari. By the way, guys, don't forget I just want to mention this quickly. Don't forget to share this video, subscribe, like this video, all of that. And also, I just want to remind you guys, because I've just remembered to tell you this, please stick around to the end so you can hear from me what the schedule in terms of content is going forward. Because I do have some things to say, and I guess, you're going to learn quite a bit more about what the plan is going forward, not just for this month, but really between now and the first Grand Prix of 2021. So yeah, stick around. But later on, again, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, share this video, all of that. Don't forget to join my Discord. Send me an email if you're, struggling mentally. Or you have some business interest that you want to express with the channel possibly, or whatever. Just, go send me an email. Links, the links in the description, but the email address is. And yeah, but getting back to the team. So Ferrari, and also that's what I was going to say. I will come to you guys in the chat in just a moment, so don't worry. Let's get on to Ferrari. This weekend they were shit. Not really a surprise. we knew they weren't going to be good. They qualified, what was it, P11 and P12, which is quite good, to be honest, considering where I thought they'd be. I thought they'd be, at best, 13th and 14th like they were at Spa. But no, it was P11 and P12. And in the race, their race pace, at least with Charles Leclerc, wasn't as bad as I was thinking it was going to be. It wasn't good. It was horrible. Once Leclerc made that great start on the safety car restart, he just fell back so quickly. Because, well, two reasons. The Ferrari has no power, and it still eats its tyres up way too quickly. Yeah, that's why Leclerc fell back through the field. Sebastian Vettel said his car was undrivable during the race. He made a couple of mistakes, I think, but, you know, if his car's undrivable, then what else do you expect? The only positive, I guess, is that there was no real mistakes made by the team. There was no spins. There was no real errors this weekend. They were just shit. But that was to be expected. But I think the only positive you could possibly take away is that the result, I don't think the pace was better than expected. I think it was as expected. I think the result itself was better than expected. P11 and P12 in qualifying, and then scoring a point in the Grand Prix. That was a lot better than I was thinking it was going to be, but still, again, terrible. Considering last year at this Grand Prix, a year and a half ago, they locked out the front row and they should have won the race quite easily. That's how far they've fallen in a year and a half. It's still astounding to me that they've fallen that far that quickly. I know the whole, power unit thing, but still, can't believe they've gone from, top to bottom, nearly. But, yeah, Ferrari, terrible race. Next weekend is going to be even worse. I think next weekend they'll be lucky to be getting both cars into Q2. Just don't see how they can get into Q3 at all unless it rains, which, let's be honest, is basically impossible. So yeah, Ferrari, no hope. Let me see what you guys have to say in the chat. By the way, great to see so many of you here. Got almost 200 people here, which I think is the most people I've had watching my stream or streams live since I returned. So thank you very much for that. And make sure to stick around later where I'll get more into content coming up and all of that. So I'm just watching the football. Just then, watching Wolves go 2-1 up against Arsenal. Right, let me just read out some comments. Gilbert says, you are a good dude, love your content. Thank you very much, mate. Thank you very, very much. Ronan Brady says, I'm starting to agree. This car has not improved at all since Austria. Are you talking about Red Bull or are you talking about Ferrari there? If you're talking about Ferrari, then yeah, they haven't really improved at all. I think Red Bull have, but it's not been as big as they would claim. Listen to Red Bull. They're, the greatest thing ever, and they're just so desperately unlucky not to win every championship every single fucking season. If only we had power, they've been saying for about 1 million years. Yeah, Ferrari, if that's who you're referencing, yeah, and he is. Yeah, they haven't. I think if you compare their pace and the grip of their car now to what it was in Austria, it probably is quite a bit better. But in terms of its pace in the pecking order compared to, Red Bull, McLaren, Racing Point, Renault, AlphaTauri, and even Alfa Romeo and Haas, it's exactly where it was in Austria. They've not really gone anywhere with this car. And that's why I kind of laugh when people say that, next season, they're going to be a bit more back up there. A third fastest team or something like that. What makes people believe that? This season, Ferrari was supposed to be, even if they weren't contending for the title, they were still supposed to be, up there, getting podiums regularly, maybe winning a couple races. And look how far they, fell. What makes you think they can't fall any further or just stay where they are? So don't think Ferrari are just going to, suddenly next season, they're going to turn up at the Australian Grand Prix and be on the third row of the grid. I don't see that happening at all because, I think Renault, they'll probably be a bit stronger next season. Of course, they've got Fernando Alonso coming. McLaren with Mercedes power. I'm expecting them to be not massively quicker, but, that slight bit quicker that, moves them up a couple positions every, say, qualifying and race compared to what it is like now. Combined with the, the good aerodynamic work they're doing. Aston Martin should be better. Mercedes will be great. Red Bull really do have to improve. Yeah. So next season, I think honestly will be mostly in terms of the pecking order. I think it's going to be basically the same. It's not going to be exactly the same. You're not going to get exactly the same constructors finishing positions or the constructor standings, but the typical battles we get for every race weekend are going to be fundamentally the same. It's going to be the top three will be Hamilton, Bottas, Verstappen. Going to get a great midfield fight between Racing Point, McLaren, and Renault, or next season they're Alpine rather F1. With Ferrari kind of in there sometimes, but sometimes not. AlphaTauri kind of the same. They'll be in there sometimes, and then Alfa Romeo, Haas, and Williams at the back. Now, who comes out on top in those battles will probably be different, but fundamentally, I think next season is going to be basically the same. So don't expect it to be like 2009 like for radical change, I guess. Right, let me find a couple more comments and then we'll get to that battle for third in the constructors between McLaren, Renault, and Racing Point. And today, I think, was a big day, a really big day in that fight. Find a couple comments here. LeMayo, Red Bull do Red Bull things. Got to remember that. Yeah, they do. I will admit though, I am getting sick to death of Red Bull and this thing they do every season where they when the season finishes, they always finish stronger than they start. I don't think anyone can deny that. But they'll finish the season with this narrative of, we're getting there, we're closing the gap, just a couple more pieces and we're there. If we add more power, which again is that's their standard excuse every single season, which it was definitely the main reason for 3 or 4 years, but it wasn't the only reason. If you listen to Red Bull, you'd think, if they had a Mercedes power unit, they'd be lapping the entire field. Again, if only we have more power, we're just a couple pieces away, all of that bullshit, and then when we get to the season, it's the same story every time. They're just not ready to compete. And yes, Mercedes, the level they are at is phenomenal and great, but that's the level, that's required. If Red Bull can't meet that level, then, they're not good enough. Simple as. One final comment I'll read is where was it? I just saw it a minute ago. There you go. It's about, and it's from Toby or Toby. There's a space there. That's why I said Toby. He asks, what do you think can Vettel achieve at Aston Martin? Purely depends on the car's performance. I don't think Sebastian Vettel will be... I don't think he'll be back to his best, but I don't think he'll be anywhere near as bad as he's been this season or even in 2019. He'll be in between, so he'll be pretty good, I think, for Aston Martin. And again, it depends on the car. If next year Aston Martin have, say, the third, fourth best car on the grid, he should be kind of like Daniel Ricciardo has this season, just been consistently getting top 5, top 6 finishes in the Grand Prix. And that's got to be the aim. So, yeah, I think for next year, that's what's possible. But then once we get to 2022, I don't think anyone can really say what's going to happen, because we don't know what the pecking order is going to be and who's going to have what. But if Aston Martin, are, say, the team that moves forward the most in the next decade, then Sebastian's in a great position. But hard to know, again, after 2022. But I think for next year, I think he's in a good car. A car that's definitely going to be better than the Ferrari car. I have no doubt about that. Anyway, let's get on to... actually, I'm going to move on from the comments. And let me get on to... by the way, hello to Mike in chat, who's I think just joined. Let me just read one more actually. Gilbert says they have Verstappen. It's the only one who can keep up or even beat Hamilton. That's the thing. If they had Gasly and Albon in their car, no disrespect to Pierre, but they had Gasly and Albon in their car, Red Bull would be upper midfield, which is what they really are. I think they're being lulled into a false sense of what they are. They think they're a top team in terms of speed and performance. They're not. They're an upper midfield team that's been made to look like a top team because Max Verstappen has the car suited directly towards him, and also Max Verstappen is a very, very, very good driver. The same as, Fernando Alonso at Ferrari back in, say, 2012, 2013. That Ferrari car was upper midfield. But Fernando so many times was able to get results that were consistently results that you'd expect of a top team driver. But the car was horrible. It really was. It's the same situation here. Car's horrible, but you got a great driver in there getting the best out of it. Well, I wouldn't say the best out of it, but best out of himself, which is making the car look a lot better. Anyway, let's get on to the midfield. McLaren, what a great day for them, and they desperately needed this. Their qualifying performance, yet again, was quite poor. Was it 9th and 15th, I think? On the grid, very poor for them. But then 4th and 5th in the race. What a result. Start of Lando Norris, so great start by Norris. And what I loved about Norris today was the result he got today was not because of his usual flashy driving or usual exciting overtakes and dramatic moments, I guess. It was just him. Again, he had a great start, so I guess you could say that was quite dramatic. But what I loved about what he did today was he showed us something that he's not shown us as much. That he, in a race situation, is able to be consistently quick and be kind of dominant in that battle that he was in with his teammate and the two Renaults and Pierre Gasly. I mean, he wasn't as good as Sergio Perez this weekend. But, he in the race, he was just so consistently quick. And was and as well, when fighting his way through traffic, was so brutal and decisive, which is exactly what you need to be in overtaking if you're going to be a really good or great Formula 1 driver. And just, after that start Lando had, he was just so clinical, so good, and that's what really helped his result, P4. Carlos Sainz, though, P5 from P15 on the grid. Now, Romain Grosjean, of course, won Driver of the Day. I think we all know why. But if we look at, in terms of the drivers who finished the Grand Prix, if we look at the best driver performance of the Grand Prix, of the people who finished, I think you'd have to say it was Carlos Sainz, because it wasn't just, he didn't quietly make his way to 5th place. He was just so kind of Alonso-esque. Just, the way, the overtakes he did, the one he did on Charles Leclerc, for example, so aggressive, a brilliant dummy overtake, down the inside. just a phenomenal move. And then, holding on to that position ahead of Charles Leclerc. And as well, his pace on the soft compound tyre that he started on was so strong. That tyre should not have held on as long as it did and been as quick as it was, but it was. And that really helped Carlos Sainz today. Then he went on to the mediums, and he was so quick on that. He passed the two Renaults like they weren't even in the same formula. And then after that, comfortably held on to his position. But just another great performance by Carlos Sainz. In Turkey as well, he was so good in Turkey. And was this close. I know you can't see my fingers, but I think you can guess, what hand gesture I'm doing. But he was this close to a podium in Turkey. And I think he probably deserved one for the just incredible pace he had. Just another great performance by Carlos Sainz in a Grand Prix. And I think, again, Carlos Sainz has proved why Ferrari signed him. They signed him because he is a really, really good driver and just all around very strong. Very strong. And the only reason, really, let's be honest, he's behind Lando Norris in the Drivers' Championship is because Carlos Sainz has had a lot more bad luck. Spa, he didn't even do the race because of a problem. Silverstone, he was running in 4th place and then his tyre failed. You know what I mean? How many points there did he lose? 15 at least. And he's only, a point behind at the minute? Could have won the Italian Grand Prix. Just a great. I think people really have overlooked Carlos Sainz this season. I know last season, Sainz got lots of praise, and I gave him lots of praise because he was so good. He was so consistently good in qualifying and the race to really be the reason why McLaren finished 4th in the Constructors. But this season, maybe it's because other drivers have done so well, such as Ricciardo, Verstappen, Perez, and Gasly, and drivers like that. But you look at this season and race by race, Carlos Sainz has not dropped his level at all. In fact, I'd say his level has increased, probably ever so slightly, but it has increased, and he is still at a very, very high level. I can't wait to see if Ferrari, eventually do make a car that is, where they should be on the grid, which is near the front, or at the front. I hope he can prove himself, because I think this guy, in a car that can win races, he is absolutely a race winner. Not just a race winner. He can win quite a few races, get quite a few pole positions. He's so, so good. Can't wait to see what he does. But yeah, 22 points for McLaren, and they are now 3rd in the Constructors' Championship with 2 races to go. The last 2 races for McLaren have been great. They've scored a lot of important points. And if they can continue that great ability to really just bang out a great race result and to be, absolutely on it in the Grand Prix and to maximise their result in the Grand Prix like they've been doing the last couple of races and to not leave a stone unturned, then I think they will get it, because that's really why they've been in the fight in the first place, is because they have been probably the most clinical in terms of point scoring out of the 3. McLaren, Racing Point, Renault. Renault, I wouldn't say Renault have had the quickest car out of the 3, but Renault have had plenty of races where they've been very quick. At times today, they were also, Renault, very quick. But, Racing Point, I think they have the quickest car out of those 3 teams. They've had plenty of races where they've been very, very strong. Hungary was one. What was it? The Spanish Grand Prix, they were very strong there. Last couple races, Turkish Grand Prix, they were 1-2 for quite a while. But the reason McLaren are in the position they are in, and the reason I think they will probably end up getting it, is because they are the most clinical. They maximize what what the best result they can possibly get is most of the time. Racing Point and Renault have a lot stronger pace, but they're very up and down. They'll have a race where they, get loads of points and they get what they deserve, and then they'll have, as we'll get into in a moment with Racing Point, a race where they should have scored a lot of points, but ended up coming away with nothing. So as long as McLaren continue on this vein of form, it should be third in the Constructors for them. Will it be third in the Constructors? It's still hard to say. I think they will get it, McLaren. But it's still hard to say if it absolutely will be them, because, next Grand Prix, McLaren could have a race like Racing Point, and then Racing Point could score, 15 points and then be right back in it, and Renault could go score 20 points or something like that. That's the great thing about this battle, is one race could completely alter that battle in a completely different direction. So, yeah, really looking forward to the next Grand Prix for that. Next up, Renault. As I said a minute ago, pace was really strong today. The problem for Renault was that I guess they just weren't as quick as McLaren. I guess that was really the problem. And I'm not sure. I mean, in qualifying, they were faster than McLaren. And, McLaren obviously faster in the Grand Prix. But I'm not sure they had, in both qualifying and the race, the absolute best car out of those three. But they did have, say, most of the time, say, in between, Racing Point, I think, in qualifying, probably had the best car out of those three. But in the race, it was probably McLaren. I know Perez was up there and all, but I think Perez really did over exceed how, good the car is. And I know, Lance Stroll was down in, 13th place in qualifying, but I think Stroll got a bit unlucky with how the team conducted his session. Yeah, Renault looked promising at many times during this Grand Prix and during the weekend, but they just didn't get that result that really just, hammered themselves right back into that battle. What was it? 7th for Ricciardo and 9th for Ocon. 8 points. I'm afraid that's not enough. That really is not enough. And I don't think Renault really would have scored any more points today, despite this thing I'm about to mention. But there was a point in the race where Ocon was ahead of Ricciardo, and Ricciardo was clearly quicker for many laps, and Renault, not for the first time this season, failed to let Ricciardo pass Ocon when he was clearly quicker. The Styrian Grand Prix, that was a race where Ricciardo lost a lot of time, held up behind Ocon when he should have been let through. And then the Russian Grand Prix was another one as well, which also led to a penalty that Ricciardo got, which was, completely meaningless. But again, it was because Renault were not decisive in, making the decision that Ricciardo needed to be ahead of Ocon. And again, this Grand Prix, too slow. Way too slow. And, them being too slow resulted in Carlos Sainz overtaking them both and then pulling away to the point where Renault couldn't really compete with him anymore. And then, by the time they made the switch, it was too late. And I don't think today it cost them any points. But I think in the past it has. And I think this season, and I'm going to be honest with Renault, because I think this whole third place in the Constructors, it really has fallen through their hands. And, they still have the opportunity to finish in third. But obviously, them being, 27 points, I think, behind McLaren. That's, to recover that in 2 races, you're going to have to bang out 2 really good Grand Prix in a row to do that. When it comes to this season, Renault, in terms of pace, in terms of results, in the races, they have been a lot better than last season. I'll admit that. I don't think anyone would deny that. But at the end of the day, last season, Renault had a poor season for me, given the expectation that they put on themselves and, we put on them. Poor season, finished in 5th in the Constructors. This season, expectations were lower, their pace was a lot better, the results in the races was a lot better, and I think their potential as a team is a lot better, given what they have. But again, 5th in the Constructors. And I feel as though that is where they're going to finish. And I think Renault have only themselves to blame. Renault, so many times this season, have had the opportunity to, to go and get 20 points just from one Grand Prix, but have just failed to do it because they just haven't been able to execute consistently during a weekend. And I think this Grand Prix kind of proves it. Qualifying 6th and 7th, very strong. And then in the race, you would expect Renault would, come away with at least 15 points, but to only come away with 8, it's just simply not good enough. It's simply not good enough. And Renault, again, I think they have only themselves to blame. They can't go on about, Racing Point have a Mercedes B car and, this, that, and the fucking other. This is the Renault Works team. This is not some Tim Pot team. This is not AlphaTauri, no disrespect. This is not Alfa Romeo, no disrespect. This is not Haas F1, no disrespect. This is the Renault Works team. They should not be losing to Racing Point. Ever. And everyone knows that. Now, when it comes to McLaren, that's different because it's McLaren. But given how good their car has been this season compared to McLaren, and given the potential they've had as a team this season, Renault, compared to McLaren and Racing Point, again, they have only themselves to blame. If they were acting as they should, considering the size of them and what they have in resources and money and all of that compared to other teams, again, they don't have an excuse to be where they are still. They really don't. And I think this season, if they do finish in 5th in the Constructors, despite being a lot better and, moving forward a bit more compared to the last couple of years, if they still finish in 5th place, I think that will perfectly sum up why this Renault project ultimately has failed. Because plenty of times Renault have looked good and looked like they could do something, but in the end, officially, in the championships, have failed to, to get the results they should have. Last season, I think Renault, they really should have finished in 4th place in the Constructors and should have done what McLaren did to them. They should have had a podium. This season, of course, we've had a couple podiums, and, again, given the pace of the car, Renault should be 3rd. They really should be. They don't have an excuse. And yeah, I think if Renault next Grand Prix, a track which is mostly just a power track, it's really just Monza, but in the desert. If Renault don't come away with a strong result there, then Renault are done. They're not finishing 3rd in the Constructors. So it's all on next week's Grand Prix. Hopefully they get a great result. I'm not banking on it though. Anyway, final team of this battle, Racing Point. So, Lance Stroll, right after that restart from the red flag, Lance Stroll got flipped over. Another scary incident where he was collected by Daniel Kvyat. I'll give my thoughts on whether that was a penalty or not in a moment. But yeah, Lance Stroll, that's disappointing because he was looking decent, I think, up until, his qualifying lap in Q2 that he did. And then in the race, still looking like he could maybe get in there and get a few points for the team, which of course would have been vital, but that happened. But still, they had Perez up in 3rd. Was in 3rd the whole Grand Prix, was looking comfortable and was just, seeing it at the end. But then with about, 4 laps to go, Sergio Perez's engine decides to grenade itself. And I felt so sorry for the guy because what I love about Perez this season is as the pressure has been getting on him and as the talk around him has been increasing in a negative way, not in terms of his own performances, but in terms of, he's not going to be on the grid most likely for next season, his performance levels increase, which is the hallmark of a very good or great driver. Very good or great drivers, when pressure increases, their performance tends to be increased. Look at Lewis Hamilton. He's one. When the pressure is really on him, Lewis Hamilton goes on to produce his best performances. And today he was so good, and so comfortable in third place, and then the engine, blows. And I think that, that blow up was a perfect description of the career Sergio Perez has had in Formula One, where he has put in so many great performances. And I think everyone on the grid and all the teams know he is such a good driver and has consistently been one of the top 10 drivers of the last decade. In my opinion, he has. He's never really had a top car to prove how good he is compared to, say, a Raikkonen or Alonso or Vettel or Ricardo, drivers like that. But again, today just described his career perfectly. Great performances, doing the best he can with what he's got, but ultimately something goes wrong that hinders his position in the sport. Because if he got a podium today, that would have just really nailed down that even if he didn't get the Red Bull drive, that, everyone knows he should have got it. So at least he would have that support from everyone that, he is easily good enough to be in that car and all of that, and to be good enough to be in Formula One. But then the engine blows. If these last two races are Perez's last in Formula One, I don't think they will be, but if they are, then I'm going to miss him so much, because I have been one of his biggest fans in the last few years, because ever since I started watching Formula One, he has been one of my favorites in terms of, just his great performances, getting podiums in cars that did not deserve to be on the podium, pace wise, not have been anywhere near a podium, but he still did it. Consistently, helping his team, whoever that team is, finish in good or great positions in the constructors, Force India. And they finished 4th in 2016, for example. He was great that season. Even 2017, he wasn't great that season, but he was still pretty good. And was, I think, better than Ocon. And was a big factor for why they finished 4th again. He's been so good. So good, but he's never been given a fair chance at a proper top team. I know he went to McLaren in 2013, but that car was not any better than the car he had in 2012. It was no better. In fact, I'd say it's probably worse, the car he had. Because at least the Sauber in 2012 had the ability to have front-running, well, not front-running pace, but, to have the pace to be in the top 5 sometimes. And it did. And that, that season was mental, but it did. The McLaren in 2013 was, at best, P7, P8 on the grid. Is, again, an awful car, considering it was McLaren. And ever since then, I don't think it's been given a fair enough chance. I think, there could have been plenty of years where he could have easily gone to Ferrari and been a very successful number 2 driver to Sebastian Vettel. And, been one of those drivers who gets podiums after podiums and a couple race wins. Again, never been given a fair chance, but I think we all know that, despite him not being given the chance, we know how good he is, and that's all that matters. I'd love to see how he did, but I don't need to see how he would do, if that makes sense. I know he would do well in a Red Bull, in a Ferrari, if Ferrari had a front running car, and in a Mercedes, I know he would do well. But I don't need him to go there. I'd really love it if he did, really love it. But if he didn't, I think this is the point I'm trying to make, is if he didn't go, my opinion is no worse of him. Because I know how good he is. I know he's good enough for those teams. But, he's just been, I won't say wrong place, wrong time, just really, I think at times there has really been an agenda against him ever since that McLaren year of, he's had his chance at a top team, which is complete bullshit, because if you actually look at the context of the situation, you'll see that McLaren were not a top team. They were just a midfield car, or midfield team with a midfield car. And again, he's been so, I won't say hard done to, but he really should have gotten his break, at a Ferrari, for example. If Ferrari had, let's say, employed him for 2017 or something, I think if he had gotten into a situation like that, I think people really would have seen how good this guy really is. But yeah, there you go. But yeah, no points scored today for Racing Point. And they are now, 17 points behind McLaren with 2 races to go. Racing Point essentially have got to recreate what they did this weekend in terms of speed, but get the result if they want to claw back enough points on McLaren to make it properly close for the final race in Abu Dhabi, because I think Racing Point will have the quickest car out of those 3 teams at that Grand Prix, because I think the Racing Point car will just be the best suited car to that track, followed then by McLaren and then Renault. Yeah, next weekend's Grand Prix, it is really critical. I think next weekend's Grand Prix, honestly, will probably decide who finishes third in the Constructors. I think Abu Dhabi, we can kind of say now who's going to be quick and who won't, and you don't really get too much drama in that Grand Prix. So yeah, next week's Grand Prix is critical. It is the race, I think, to decide it. But I'll come to you guys in a moment in the chat. I just want to quickly kind of rush through the rest of the teams, because I don't want to be streaming too long tonight. So let me just go through the rest of the teams. Pierre Gasly, we'll go AlphaTauri. Pierre Gasly was great today. 6th place, another great performance. Did a 1-stopper. I don't know how he did. Those tyres were not hanging on at all, really, for anyone. But was able to finish in 6th. Yes, the safety car helped him a lot, but he still probably would have finished in 7th or 8th place, even if even if the safety car did not come out. So great performance, and I think this weekend he was just great, and he's always been very good here. Bahrain in 2018, he qualified 6th, and he finished in 4th. There you go. He's always had an eye around here, I guess you could say. But yeah, Pierre, great performance. Just further solidifying why he has been one of the top 5 drivers this season. Daniel Kvyat. It's a shame for Daniel, this weekend's race, because his pace was quite strong at times, and in qualifying I thought he did pretty well. But what happened in the race with the contacts, with Grosjean and Stroll, I think it's a really bad day for him, to be honest. I don't think he was at fault at all for the crash with Grosjean. I think that was just simply, I don't think there was anyone at fault for that. It was just simple, first lap, cars are really close together on a tight piece of racetrack. The cars are quite a bit wider than they used to be. So contact is a lot more inevitable now than it used to be a few years ago. But yeah, there's no one really at fault for that. It's just a racing incident for me. And then I thought his contact with Stroll was a racing incident, even though he got a penalty. I don't really see what he could have done any differently. He had every right to put his car down the inside of that corner in the middle of the track, the hairpin corner, where it is a hairpin. You know, he had enough of his car there. He had enough of his car at the inside to deserve space, but Stroll... I don't think Stroll turned in on him because I don't think Stroll knew he was there, and that's why I think it was a racing incident, because Stroll wasn't looking in his mirrors, and I don't think he knew he was there. That's why Stroll turned in. And Daniel had every right to put his car there, and it was just kind of a misunderstanding, and that's why the contact happened. And I think the reason they gave him a penalty was two reasons. One, he's Daniel Kvyat, and he has a reputation. And two, I think the over-dramatic, you know, car flipping over didn't help Daniel's predicament in terms of whether he was going to get a penalty or not. But it definitely, for me, was not a... it was not a penalty. It was a clear racing incident, just a misunderstanding. One driver didn't know he was there, and the other driver thought he knew he was there because he had his car, you know, right up the inside, and you know, contact happened. So I don't really see that as a penalty, but you know, there you go. But yeah, good race for AlphaTauri. Good weekend. They were quite quick, to be honest. Kind of Imola-like pace, not as good as Imola, but yeah, pretty good weekend. Sadly for them, though, they're not going to catch Ferrari in the Constructors, which is sad because I think they do deserve 6th in the Constructors ahead of them. Maybe they'll get a great result for the next Grand Prix and then catch them up. Who knows? But yeah, they're not going to finish most likely higher than where they are. Alfa Romeo weren't too bad. They were quicker than Haas and Williams. They have really been quicker than Haas and Williams for a long time now. And I think they do have the best car out of those three. And I think aerodynamically, they do have quite an underrated package. The only thing holding them back is the power unit. But yeah, today, they didn't really do anything. But Antonio Giovinazzi was quite good. Raikkonen had damage to his front wing, which was bad for him. Considering, you know, he does do pretty well here. But I thought, you know what, I thought Antonio did pretty well this weekend. First, out-qualifying Raikkonen at a track where Kimi has been so strong at, you know, since we started racing here. But not only that, but, you know, being, for a change, not, you know, awful in the race in comparison to what he did in qualifying. So, I thought Antonio was pretty good. But other than that, yeah, Alfa Romeo never really had a hope of finishing the points. Haas F1, well, when it comes to Grosjean, we're not going to talk about him anymore because, you know, we've talked about him enough. Kevin Magnussen, kind of feel sorry for him because I know mentally he probably was a bit damaged from what happened to Romain. I mean, who wouldn't? You know, your teammate in the same car has that happen to them. You're going to have some pretty bad thoughts going through your mind. But then, you know, Magnussen then had front wing damage after making contact with, I think, Lance Stroll's car when it flipped over. Or someone's car when that whole thing happened. And then just really raced around at the back. Couldn't really get up in there and, you know, finish in a strong-ish position for that car. You know, pure and simply because the car is really bad. This Haas F1 car has been easily the worst car they've produced. And I know the Ferrari power unit doesn't help. But the grip of it is not, you know, it's not that good. So a lot of work needs to go in over the winter. And then finally it's Williams. I thought Russell was pretty good in this Grand Prix. There was plenty of times during the race he was up in like 12th place. Sometimes 11th place. So yeah, I thought he did pretty well today. His pace did drop off though as the race went on. But in the first half of the Grand Prix, you know, if there was a couple more retirements, he would have been solidly in the points and not really been under massive pressure. So I thought Russell was pretty good. Latifi, I thought, did pretty well today considering he qualified last. And he got kind of up in there in the battle with Alfa and Haas. I'd say probably for the first time in a while, Williams actually looked better in the race than they did in qualifying. Which is, yeah, it's quite weird. Because normally in qualifying, they tend to do the absolute best they can for for the entire weekend. That's been the case for years. And then in the race, they tend to fall to shit. That was kind of the opposite today. But anyway, let's come to you guys in the chat to see what you guys have to say about all these teams. Crystal Racing says Kvyat Stroll was a racing incident. Remember, Leclerc received no penalty for his collision with Stroll at the Russian Grand Prix. Yes, you're bang on. By the way, I didn't think Leclerc deserved a penalty for that Stroll incident in Russia, as well. Because if you look back, I don't really see, what could Leclerc have done differently? It's not like he understeered and wiped Stroll off the track. Basically, what happened was on the exit of the corner, because it was really tight between the two and they were really close together, contact was made and Stroll's car spun off into the wall. I don't think Leclerc really could have done anything differently. It was just a typical race, lap one crash. Same thing here. It was just, things got tight, contact happened, and yeah, it was sad that a crash happened. But what else do you expect on a first lap when it's so harem-scarum? Right, let's read a few more comments, and then we'll get to the drivers and constructors standings for the Bahrain Grand Prix. And also, again, make sure to stick around to the end. Let you guys know what I'm doing going forward and what the schedule is kind of going forward. Quick look. Janelle Boyd says, I thought I was the only one who thought that. Like, Ricciardo is fast. He was being held up behind Ocon, and really think if the switch was made earlier, he would have been in a higher position. I don't think he would have necessarily finished in a higher position, but they didn't exactly, do their best to get the best result they could by keeping him behind Ocon for so long when he was so clearly faster, let's be honest. I know Nib, who I was communicating to a lot during the Grand Prix. I know he was, just again baffled by why it takes so long to make such an obvious decision, which is what it was. But yeah, you're not the only one. I think there's plenty of people thinking, what the fuck are you doing? Just make the decision. It doesn't take 10 laps to to clearly see that one of your drivers is clearly faster than the other, and that if you let him through, that, that driver who's faster is just going to pull away and, get after the drivers who are trying to be fighting. Takes what? 2 or 3 laps, I'd say, is what I would say is the reasonable amount of time that you should allow teams to analyze the situation and make a decision. But when it gets, 7, 8 laps and gets, near enough 10 laps, you're just really slacking. You're really fucking slacking. And Renault have been really poor at that this season. Just not, making those decisions when they needed to really fucking happen. And in the Styrian Grand Prix, it really cost them because Ricciardo started, I remember, the harder compound tyre. He was on the medium and Ocon was on the soft. And Ricciardo was clearly faster. Eventually got let through, but was behind Ocon for what, 10, 15 laps? And then the reason Ricciardo at the end fell off kind of the cliff and lost so many positions was because he had to pit earlier from his medium, his harder compound tyre choice, because his tyres were hurt from following Ocon. So Renault literally caused that result from that happened because Ricciardo had to pit earlier than he wanted to, and then they wanted to, well then they should have. Should have pitted probably 10 laps later in that Grand Prix, but he had really hurt his front tyres following. Right, let me find a couple more, and then we'll get to the standings. Gilbert. Hey, I see that 65 people are watching. Smash that like button, please. Absolutely. Send your love to Chaza. Thank you very much. Alonso will be very vocal on the radio next season. That's the thing. Ricciardo is competitive. He's got fire in his belly, no doubt. He's a very, super competitive guy. But the way he conducts himself whilst being very competitive, compared to Fernando Alonso, is completely different. So I think Daniel is sometimes to a fault. He can be a bit too polite with his radio messages when it comes to, let me the fuck through. I'm faster. Fernando next season, he will make it pretty clear he is faster if that happens. So, yeah, there's no way they're going to get away with that next season. But, yeah, I think we will go on to the drivers and constructors standings to finish the stream off, basically. So, Lewis Hamilton, of course, won the championship in Turkey. He is, well, look how many points clear he is. 131 points clear of Valtteri Bottas in the same car. Bottas, I know he's not on the same level as Lewis Hamilton, but Bottas ain't that bad. I'm telling you that. Max Verstappen third, only 12 points behind. If Max got second in the drivers, that's an incredible result. Ricciardo fourth, Perez fifth, Leclerc sixth, Norris seventh, Sainz eighth, Albon ninth, and Gasly in 10th. And then the rest of the order: Stroll in 11th, then Ocon, Vettel, Kvyat, Hulkenberg still 15th, Raikkonen 16th, then Giovinazzi, Grosjean, Magnussen, Latifi, and Russell. Most importantly, the constructor standings. So Mercedes, of course, are champions. They won that in Imola about a month ago. Red Bull second. They've secured second, basically. They're just over 100 points clear of McLaren, who are now third in the constructors with 2 races to go and are 17 points clear. They can bang out another great result in the Sakhir Grand Prix around the oval track that it is. Then I think McLaren have basically got it wrapped up, because, in Abu Dhabi, it's going to take something really bad for McLaren for it to, swap around, both cars retiring and Racing Point getting a third and fourth or something. Racing Point fourth, Renault fifth. Renault have got to get a big result in the next Grand Prix, or else they are done for. Ferrari sixth, AlphaTauri seventh, and Alfa Romeo eighth, Haas ninth, and Williams in 10th. There you go. There's your Bahrain Grand Prix. A traumatic Bahrain Grand Prix. I hope everyone, by the way, mentally is okay with what's happened today. I know it was very traumatic. It was for me. Brought a lot of flashbacks back for me. The Antoine Hubert crash, it still lives in my mind very prominently when it comes to racing. And, it sent me straight back to that. So I'm hoping you guys are coping well enough. And if you're not, then, my DMs on Discord are always open. And you can always send me an email if you're struggling mentally for whatever reason. So, yeah. But before I leave, I just need to let you guys know what is coming up on the channel. So you may have seen a channel post on my Discord and on my community page where I said basically I have suffered a relapse in my depression, which I have. I am getting better. This time last week, I was in an absolute fucking state. I couldn't get out of bed. I was in bed basically for the whole weekend last weekend. Didn't see any sunlight at all. Drinking alcohol, crying, all of that. And yeah, just, this time last week, I was in a really bad place. I'm in a lot better place now because I've resolved situations with certain people, and I'm, again, a lot better of a place now than I was, which is great. But because I am not mentally, as I said in the post, I'm not mentally strong enough and confident enough yet. There's just no way I could bring watch-alongs back that soon. I know I did them for the Imola Grand Prix, but really I only did those, as I said at the time, as a test to see whether I want to do them again. And I do want to do them again. I really do. I want to do them again. But it was, in terms of whether I did it for the rest of the 2020 season, it was down to whether I had the mental strength and confidence to do it, not whether I want to. I do want to do it, but I just didn't have the... It's not that I didn't have the will to do it. It was just I didn't have the confidence and strength mentally to get through it. And I'll be honest, it felt different once I got to the race weekend, but in the build up to the weekend, it felt like the only way I could actually do the streams, watch alongs, is if I was kind of drunk. And I can't do that. That's horrible. I can't, I have no problem drinking on stream. I probably will eventually do that. Not heavily, just, a light-ish refreshment, I guess you could say. But, when it gets to the point where the only way you can do a stream is if you are fueled by alcohol, then you don't have the confidence and strength to be able to do such a stream. So, yeah, that's why I couldn't do it. And yeah, there will be no watch-alongs for the rest of the season. And to be honest, there's only 2 races left. There's no real point bringing them back. Everything's really decided. The only thing is that 3rd place in the Constructors, which it really does come down to next weekend's Grand Prix, I think, in terms of who finishes where. But yeah, watch-alongs will not be coming back until next season. They will be coming back eventually, don't worry, but just not yet. And I think, given the way my life's going, again, I did suffer a setback, felt horrible and all that, but given the way my life is going now, right now, and given certain things coming up, such as, for example, I'm starting a new job tomorrow, which I'm fucking super excited, but also super nervous about, which is, at the moment, it's only a temporary job until Christmas, but if it does extend into New Year and beyond, then I think I'll be in a lot better of a headspace going forward. And, if things with the channel keep improving, and just in life, socially keep improving, then I will be in a lot better of a headspace to be able to do watch-alongs for 2021. Hopefully starting with the Australian Grand Prix. So, we'll see. But I think the best thing to do is just, when it comes to watch-alongs, is to wait until then. That's the best thing to do. But in terms of the content coming up for December and the rest of the off-season, it really goes as this. So, of course, next weekend we have a Grand Prix. Now, next weekend, my personal plan is to do what I did for the Turkish Grand Prix on this channel, which is a qualifying and a race reaction live. By the way, the weekend reviews that I was doing for the Grand Prix, I'm not going to bring those back. I'm afraid, because I don't really have the time to do them. And also, the only reason I was doing them was to really get back in the swing of things and to get back to, uploading recorded videos and get used to editing videos again. Because there's actually videos, a lot longer formed videos and the videos I've been working on a bit longer that I want to kind of put more time towards, videos that I think could really be, big boosters for the channel in terms of, exposure and all of that. So yeah, the weekend reviews, they won't be coming back, so there won't be any, recorded videos during the week. So the next videos on the channel will be a qualifying reaction and a race reaction stream for next weekend's Sakhir Grand Prix. Both streams should begin at about 7 p.m. UK time for both Saturday and Sunday. So don't forget to come along to that. Subscribe, hit the notification bell. And then the final race is a week after that, in 2 weeks from now, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Now, for that, what I'm probably going to do is, I don't think I'll do a qualifying reaction. What I'm most likely going to do is a race reaction stream for that particular Grand Prix. And then after that, the rest of December, I don't know exactly, what the upload schedule is going to be. I have a vague idea in my mind what it's going to be, but I want to let you guys know that basically the aim of what I want to do with this channel is, between now and say the car reveals that start in February, I basically want to get this channel back into a position where, I get back into a regular schedule of uploading, and we kind of get this channel back firing on most of its cylinders, or on all cylinders, by the time we get again to car reveals and testing and the actual season. So that's the aim over the winter, is just to get back in the swing of things. And the videos that come out, they're not always going to be videos you expect. They're not going to be always, not going to be videos on certain days, certain times every single week. But I need to get back into the swing of things so that when we come back to the season, I can get back to having a proper schedule again. So that is the plan. But Abu Dhabi Grand Prix weekend is in 2 weeks. I'll probably do a race reaction stream for that. And then I am working on a recorded video at the moment that I'm hoping to get uploaded before the new year. Which is about a team that is at the front of the grid. Or near the front of the grid. Hopefully I can get that uploaded. Say, I don't know, a couple weeks after the final race sometime. And then in terms of streams, I am planning on doing one stream around Christmas time. I don't know if it'll be like Christmas Eve or Boxing Day or maybe, the days in between Boxing Day and New Year's Eve. I don't know yet, but I am planning on doing a stream sometime then. I don't know what it'll be. Hoping I can bring you-know-who on and we can reconnect for the first time since, January? I think was the last time we did a stream together. Or December, something like that. So there is, there are plans in my head, vague plans of what the situation is going forward. But I'd say between mid-December and the end of the year, there probably won't be that many videos. They, one stream and maybe one recorded video. And then, once we get into January, there'll be a lot more content. There'll probably be quite a few more streams and maybe, 2 or 3 recorded videos in there. I think you guys will enjoy. So, And of course, once we get to February, car reveals and pre-season testing, and then the season starts and all of that. So, there is content coming up, and I want you guys to know that there is content coming up on the channel. This isn't just, I'm not just gonna do this whenever the fuck I can be bothered. I guess I am, but I am still going to put effort into these videos and into this channel. That's what I guess I'm trying to say. Of course, I know I have other commitments now, but that doesn't mean, I'm just going to ignore this channel and treat it like, some, like, hobby that I rarely do. I just want you guys to know that going forward. But for that content coming up, like this video to show that, you are supportive of that. Share this video as well. Help grow the channel. Subscribe to this channel if you do like the content and you like the content that's going to come up on the channel. Again, join my Discord server to be part of the community. There's almost 500 people there, and it's very, very communicative, and it's you won't get bored. Put it that way. In that server, you'll have plenty of stuff to talk about when it comes to Formula One with plenty of people. So if you do want to do that, make sure to join the Discord. Link below in the description. Comment down below what you thought of this Grand Prix, what you thought of everything that happened, including, the Grosjean crash, what your overall thoughts about that were. There you go. That's today's stream. But I just want to say, thank you guys, the people who did, and I'm sure have during this stream and are right now, who have been giving me support with my my tough times that have come back recently. And I'd say briefly, for the moment, I just want to say, really big thank you. Because, if I didn't have you guys supporting me, I really don't know if I'd still be here. So I really appreciate it. Really, really appreciate it. Hopefully, by the way, I will be bringing some additions to the channel in terms of, differences in what you see in the next month or two. That's another thing I want to say. yeah, you might see some differences. And I think one of them you'll like a lot, and I think one of them will really help you guys connect with the stream a lot better. So yeah, hopefully I can bring that soon. But yeah, thank you guys so much for the support. I really do appreciate it. Hopefully you guys, you're not too traumatized from today. And hopefully, you're going to go on with your rest of your week and, try and put this to the back of your mind. But yeah, thank you guys for the support. Really do appreciate it. And until the 2020 Sakhir Grand Prix at the same track, where I'll be live for a reaction to qualifying and the race, it's been me, Shazza HD. Goodbye.